time because there's a lot of emotions. Some kids are super excited for graduating or for summer and whatnot. Some kids are they're sad because their friends are leaving them, or they're not going to see people over the summer or whatnot. And for most of my teaching career, I've been moved in the summer, or I've changed schools in the summer, or the end of the school year, usually you get used to students leaving you. You know, they're graduating, they're moving on, and like you build these relationships with these kids, and you really get to know them, and you build like you form these bonds with these kids, and you look forward to seeing them. You know, you're like, oh, this kid's gonna be in my next class, or this kid's gonna be in my next class. And you find interest in them. And so getting to the end of the school year, I'm taking a different job, and I've only been at this school for about a year, and you don't know what type of kids you're gonna get when you go to a new school. Like when you're at the same school, you're like, okay, I know these kids are coming through, these kids are graduating out, these are the kids I'm expecting in and whatnot. But when you're at a new school, you don't know what type of kids you're going to get. And then you get there, and they end up being these amazing little people. And you, as a teacher, you're trying to do your best by all the kids, right? Like, I wholeheartedly love all my students. I don't always like them. And so they're the kids that are harder in your classroom, you have to put more time and effort into. And the kids that are more self-sufficient, those ones, like, you don't pay as much attention to them, but like the ones that have good personalities, you get to know them. And so some of my students who are gamers, they kept talking about who are NPCs, non-playable characters. You know, these are the ones that you walk up to, and if you click on them, they say the same thing every time you see them, or like they're just there to make it look like the scene is more populated. So they're just players that walk around, and like they really don't have any purpose other than to either give you a little bit of information and then leave them behind, or they just are fillers. So my students were talking about who are NPCs in real life, and it's an interesting concept because, like, who are the ones that are meaningful? So you start thinking about which of these kids are going to be meaningful, and I'm sure they do the same thing unconsciously, but we do that throughout our whole lives. And you got some kids that will be quite memorable, for good or for bad. And you've got these kids that just kind of like exist in the background, and so it makes you question, like, have I done the best for all these kids? And it's a little upsetting how much effort you have to put into some kids, and then you look at them at the end of the year and you're like, you just didn't grow up, or you didn't get anything that I said. You were a waste of my time, which is a terrible thing to say, but all this effort and everything, and you're still the same way. And you question yourself as a teacher, like, did I waste my time on this kid? Like, could I have put my efforts into other students and benefit them more than these other students? And it really looks at the value of, like, being a teacher or how students value their teachers or school for that matter. And so you go through this whole year, and I sometimes use the metaphor of the rope, and the teacher is the rope, and you hope that they're all together. They've got their life together, you know. So as these students started becoming more and more in your life, they take strands, because you need this kid, you need to help pull this kid up. So if you're the rope, you're pulling these kids up, and you're helping them develop and progress as human beings. And so some kids take a lot of strings, you know, they take a lot of your time, a lot of your effort, because if you don't wrangle them first, then the other kids can't learn, you know, because they're the ones being distracting or being destructive and like causing disruptions in the truest sense. And that comes in a lot of different forms. So you got to put more time and more effort, and like you got to work with these kids a lot more. And then you got these other kids that take very little. So, and they might need one strand, or they might not even need a strand. They can function by themselves. They're self-sufficient. And I guess that's kind of where you want to get the kids all to, is like to the point where by the time you leave them, they don't need you anymore. And there's a difference between needing and wanting. Like, hopefully, if you've built a good, healthy relationship with a student, they will like you, because that's what it comes down to, is like being likable is doing things in their best interest, whether or not you do have to yell at them or correct them or anything like that. And because they recognize that this is healthy, that this is strong, that this is like a person that they benefit being around, they will like you. They'll want to be around you, and so they care about you. And so getting to this point in this school year, and then taking a different job at a different school, there were a lot of emotions. You know, you got some kids that ran out of the room crying, and some kids that are screaming at you, and some kids telling you how they don't like you. And ultimately, I've been saying thank you for caring. You know, like that's all you can do, because they're going through these emotions because they don't know what to do, because they do care about you. And as a person grows, they realize that people will come in and go out of your life, and sometimes they'll be in your life for a long time, and sometimes they'll be there just for a short time. And if you care about them, that means they affected you in a positive way. So it's sad, and it's okay to be sad about not getting to see a friend, or not getting to see somebody that you care about, or that provided you with a healthy relationship. And it really gets down to the idea of what is good. You know, like I talk to my students, and having to give back all this artwork. You've got some kids that look at their artwork and they just throw it away, or they tear it up, or they just don't care about it. And here they put this effort into it, and to have them destroy something that they just put all this effort in, or not, and just destroy it, it just shows the worth that they are producing. Whereas if a student really works hard on a piece of work and cares about this piece of work, they're not going to want to throw it away, because they've formed this relationship with it. And so this idea of what is good is being able to put in the time, the effort, the craftsmanship, the things that make things of worth, you know? Like, if it's worthless, then you throw it away. But if it's worth something, it's valuable to you. You don't want to get rid of it. And like, you could go to a kid's house, and they've got a player on a video game that they've been spending all this time in. And I bet you money, if you would delete their character that they've spent all this time and effort in, they would lose their minds. And here, they're putting so much time and effort into these things, and to them, it has worth because of that time and effort. But ultimately, they're not getting anything out of it. You know, maybe some enjoyment, maybe some time, but like, at the end of the day, that thing is not paying you back. The investment is not repaying you. So you think about these things that you invest in, particularly relationships or artwork or anything like that. Anything that you put good work into, like you're doing it to the best of your ability, and you care about it, and you nurture it, and you develop it, like, there's a connection. And so at the end of the year, when these kids are leaving, or now that I'm leaving, they don't know what to do, because they've formed this relationship, they've put this time, this effort, it's an artwork. And the understanding that things come and go, people are in your life for a short time or a longer time, but ultimately, if you are saddened by it being there, that means that it was good and it affected you. And what I've been kind of talking to my students about is, even though we might never see each other again, the fact that they're sad is a positive thing, because they have been influenced. It's helped shape who they are. Like, even the negative people in their lives will cause them to realize that this might not be the people that I want to be around, or this action, this way of being impacted me negatively, and therefore I don't want to act like that to others, do unto others. So getting towards the end of this year, having to leave, I've had to talk about relationships and what that means to being a human being, and being for lack of a better term, an artist. You know, like, if you're going to do something, do it to your best abilities, and like, don't be destructive, be uplifting. And like, the kids that are mad at me for leaving, they think I'm leaving them, and it really has nothing to do with that. Like, I wish I could bring them with me. I wish that some of these kids that are graduating, I would get to spend more time with. But ultimately, this is what life is. There is always going to be changes. There's always going to be people coming in and going out, and you're always going to be learning something about yourself and them, and what relationships are. So ultimately, like, you want, as a teacher, you want the best for them, and like, you want them to be, by the time that you are no longer in each other's presence, or they go and graduate, you hope that you have done enough or something that has positively affected them. And if I've done my job right, by the time I leave or they leave, they will not need me anymore. They know how to conduct their ways through life. I've taught them well enough. And it's nice that they want to be around me, but this is what it has been always. And so, being older, going through the same things that they're going through right now, it's like remembering what these feelings are, remembering what it's like to be a kid, but also holding yourself to that place of, this is what it was like, but I got through it, this is how I got through it, this is what you need to recognize about life, is we need to take the goods and the bads, and we need to learn from it. And no matter what we do, we remember those things as positive things, whether or not they were good or bad. So I ultimately pray that all these kids turn out wonderfully, that their lives are great, and that God blesses them and keeps them and shows them the path that they need to follow in their life, and gives them the strength and the wherewithal to follow that path so that they can lead healthy and productive lives. And maybe if we see each other again in the future, I will get to see that they've been successful, and that I did affect them in a good way, and they've learned lessons that will guide them through their lives. It's a lot. And ultimately it gets to the end of the year, and as a teacher you spend all this time splitting this rope that is you, and pulling up these kids, and you hope that the strings of your rope, the strands of your rope, were invested in the right place so that you can pull up all these kids. And so once summer hits, it's like, as a teacher, you need to pull all those strands back together and figure out what you are again, and get yourself strong so that by the next year you can do it all over again. And I don't think that's understood enough as teachers. And now we're doing so much more, because a lot of the things that we're dealing with kids has to do with moral development and social development, and dealing with the things, even if, especially if the children go home to houses that are not supportive, or maybe the parents are still figuring this out because they didn't get the mentoring or the education or the teachings that would get them to the place that I hope that I'm getting them. I hope those students know how much I love them, in the purest sense, in the sense that I want nothing but the best for them. So that's all I have to say about that. Thank you for your time and your attention.
Do more, do better.